When the rich guy came looking for his savior in the slums, my sister locked me in my room. She put on my white dress and, with a face similar to mine, rushed into his arms. "Simon, you finally found me," she said. Later, Simon insisted on marrying the sister from the slums despite his family's objections, and got dubbed the god of pure love. On the wedding day, my sister looked at me with a mocking grin and mouthed, "This lifetime, I'm the one marrying into wealth." Inside, I felt calm, unaffected by her taunts. Living life again, I found I preferred gold over love. In the last life, she enjoyed prosperity. Now, it's my turn. Jenny locked me away, and I heard her excited, whispering outside, "I'm going to marry into a wealthy family this time." That's when I realized she had been reborn too. In the previous life, I accidentally saved Simon when he was being trafficked. With his injured ankle, I carried him through the night along mountain paths, taking him to the nearest police station in town. As the sole heir of the K group, Simon never stopped searching for me after he returned. In his words, he wanted to repay my life-saving grace by dedicating his life. But I turned him down. Growing up in the slums, I was worlds apart from someone raised in the lavish K group. Yet Simon was adamant. For me, he defied his parents and refused the marriage arranged with a prestigious family's daughter, eventually cutting ties with his family altogether. I wavered then, but later, I learned how a rich kid's sudden infatuation could ruin an ordinary girl's life. Recalling the past fills me with dread. Once again, Simon, after being apart from the person who saved him, showed deep affection and proposed we be together. Unlike the old me, Jenny gleefully said yes, immediately. Our parents were thrilled, practically worshipping Jenny. My dad, flushed and tipsy, praised Jenny. "Jenny, you really turned our family's fate around." Jenny basked in their admiration, her face full of pride and ambition. At night, she came to my room and warned me softly, "You're not taking Simon away from me. He's committed to me in this life, not you. He said he'll soon convince his parents and marry me." I watched her with cold eyes, staying silent. This lifetime, I just want to stay far from Simon. Simon, just like in the previous life, transformed into the pure love god in front of the media to ensure he could marry Jenny. He announced, "I will not have an arranged marriage with Miss Sandy." He lamented being born into such a family but vowed to defy destiny to be with his true love. The media blew it out of proportion, putting K Group and Sandy under an embarrassing spotlight. Everything unfolded exactly like it did before. To Jenny, she believed she was one step closer to joining high society. She quit her internship, devoted herself to learning about fashion, luxury goods, and skincare, preparing to live as a wealthy wife. Then Simon visited again. I was heading out when we crossed paths. It was the first time I saw Simon since being reborn. Memories churned, but my heart stayed calm like still waters. Simon paused upon seeing me. Being fraternal twins, Jenny and I share some similarities. Before Simon could speak, Jenny joyfully clung to his arm. "Simon, you're here," not forgetting to cast me a warning glare. Simon glanced over me subtly, a faint confusion creasing his brow. "And who is this?" he asked. Jenny gritted her teeth and pulled a sweet smile, wrapping her arm around mine. "This is my sister, Simon. You should call her your sister, too." Simon kept looking at me, as if searching for something. In his dark eyes, it was as if a pale hand was tearing away the veil of past lives, slowly revealing the truth. Nervously, I clenched my fists, heart racing, afraid Simon might remember something. In our past lives, after we married, Simon and I had a period of bliss. But I wasn't naive enough to believe we'd stay that way forever. I tried to fit into his world but could never keep up with Simon's pace. I saw it in the eyes of K-group relatives, even Simon's friends. They viewed me as the Cinderella intruding on their world. Their careless words or mere glances were enough to make me lose face. So, I told Simon I wanted to take the graduate school entrance exam. Before he found me, I planned to study hard for a year while working. That way, even if my parents disapproved, I could pursue it on my own. Simon gave me a grand wedding, flew me to various places on his private jet for our honeymoon, making me temporarily put aside my plans. He'd say, "Graduate school is tough. You're my wife now. No need to work so hard. I'll feel bad." Post-wedding, when I brought it up again, Simon stuck with the same rhetoric, even pulling me out of classes at my learning center. Back then, he couldn't bear to let me endure any hardships, wanting to give me the world on a silver platter. But eventually, the sweetness shattered. "Judy, I give you so much money every month. What do you do with it? Can you not at least make an effort with your appearance?" I heard disdain and irritation in his voice. That moment, I realized I'd lost the gamble. Yes, agreeing to marry Simon was a gamble from the start. Then, he hired etiquette coaches for me, signed me up for all sorts of high society courses, encouraging me to shop and learn how to present myself. He wanted to package me to be like them. He once told me he admired my resilience. Like the time I saved him, my little body could barely carry his weight, but I still insisted on carrying him to the clinic. Yet he wanted to turn me into a refined doll, build a gilded cage, and keep me there just to be admired. If anyone pointed out any of my flaws, he would smooth them out to fit the image his world adored. That way, he'd save face. I tried hard, even though it wasn't me anymore. Still, his family and friends wouldn't really look at me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I couldn't recognize myself. Simon had no idea I needed sleeping pills to get through the night. I even had to see a therapist regularly. In the 5th year of our marriage, he suddenly said, "Judy, let's have a baby." I looked at him, unsure of how to feel. He frowned. "You've been married to me for 5 years, and nothing's happening. I can't explain this to my family. My parents still haven't fully accepted you. Maybe you should look at yourself for reasons." "Judy, I can't keep indulging you forever. I'll have a nutritionist come tomorrow to help get you in shape. If the first one's a girl, it's fine by me. But you know what the older generation thinks, they want a boy and a girl, the more kids, the better." I cut him off before he could finish. I said, "There's nothing wrong with me. I've been on birth control all these years. It's safe. If I stop taking it, I can get pregnant. But I just don't want kids." That was the first time Simon really lost his temper with me. And those previous 5 years were like one long fuse. "Judy, I went against my family to be with you. I've pampered you, hired people to take care of you. You don't have to do anything. And you won't even give me a child. Judy, I was wrong about you. Everyone was right. You're not worthy of me. You're just someone who climbed up from the bottom, blinded by money and power. Did you really think you'd become a phoenix after marrying me? I'm telling you, without me, you're nothing." I laughed at the man who once promised me the world and to love me forever. I had lost, completely and utterly. So I told him, "Simon, let's get a divorce." "Simon, call someone." Jenny's voice suddenly cut in. I snapped out of my past memories, shivering a bit. Simon was back to normal, greeting me casually. "Hi, I'm Simon." I was a bit relieved. Simon hadn't been reborn. How could he remember a past life? Even if he did, who cares? I wouldn't go with him again. I smiled slightly. "Hi." Jenny quickly pulled Simon over to meet my parents. She was so nervous, so scared. She knows things gained through deceit and theft can slip away with the slightest lapse. I stopped watching them and left. I went to the city library and borrowed some books. I timed my return to when Simon would be gone. But as I approached the door, I heard Simon's voice. "My parents still disagree with me marrying you, Jenny, so you'll need to be patient for now." Then came Jenny's sweet voice. "As long as I'm with you, no matter the hardship, I'm willing." But her next words betrayed her. "You could try standing up to them. They're your parents. They won't really abandon you," suggested Jenny. Simon paused. "Standing up to them? I've already done that. You heard what I said to the media, right? I'm saying, maybe try something like hunger strike or threaten to cut ties if they don't agree." Jenny continued, then quickly backtracked. "I obviously don't want you to go against your parents, but I really wish they'd accept us so we could be together forever." Simon chuckled softly. "I know." Standing at the doorway, hearing this, I silently laughed. In my previous life, Simon did the same thing to be with me, spoke out publicly, went on a hunger strike, even cut ties with his family. But with only one son, the heir to the family business, his parents couldn't truly let him go. So less than a week later, they gave in and pleaded for him to come home. They even accepted me as their daughter-in-law. I remember Simon's mother meeting me before our wedding. A woman in her 50s, looking barely over 30, sat gracefully across from me. Without saying a word, there was already a silent barrier between us. I realized then that I might never really belong in Simon's world or his mother's. But Simon had done so much for me. If I backed out then, it'd be like deserting. It'd be a betrayal. So, I faced Simon's mother straight on, sitting upright to mask my nerves. Simon's mother just smiled slightly and said, "Miss Judy, if you've really decided to marry Simon, I hope you don't regret it." There wasn't any threat in her words, yet they chilled me to the bone. In the hellish years that followed, I often thought back to her remark and my straight-back stance that day, admiring her for seeing right through me. She knew from the start what my marriage to Simon was about and tried to warn me. The truth was, I'd warned myself too, but I still chose to bet on it, and ended up gambling away my entire life. My parents returned. Turns out they had gone out to buy groceries. We went in together. I just gave Simon a slight nod before heading into the room. The soundproofing in our house isn't great, but they weren't saying anything outside anymore. In the end, Simon didn't stay for dinner. He said he needed to rush back to convince his parents, but I knew he just wasn't comfortable with my home environment. Forget about Simon, anyone off the street would think we live in a slum, and Simon, with his upscale background, wouldn't like it any better. In the past, he was the same. He said he liked me, but I could tell he didn't like my background or how I grew up. Like he mentioned later, I was a beautiful flower growing in ruins. He liked the flower, not the ruins. How could he like the ruins? Once Simon left, Jenny came in. Have you been eavesdropping on Simon and me outside? I sat down at my small desk and opened up a borrowed book. Don't worry, Simon's already into you. I'm not going to compete. But the calmer I was, the more nervous Jenny got. She's afraid of me like one would a wolf ready to steal a treasure. She thinks I'm the wolf, but she doesn't realize Simon isn't a treasure, but a burning hot coal. I won't laugh at her for it. I only learned this after reliving my life. Judy, what are you planning? Before I could reply, Jenny said, I don't care what you're planning. If you even think about taking Simon from me, I won't let you get away with it. I chuckled. Why do you think I'd compete with you for Simon? Jenny glared at me, searching my face for any hint of emotion. Did you? Did you really? She wanted to know if I was reborn too. I didn't mind telling her. I'm just like you. Jenny eyed me more suspiciously. Then why won't you admit it? She threatened. Judy, I killed you once, and I can do it again. And now I have Simon. This time, taking you down would be easy. No risk to me. If you're worried, I can leave, I said, grabbing my book. I'm planning to go to grad school. I don't have time for Simon. Jenny looked puzzled. You really won't compete for Simon? Why not? Had it last life, not interested this time, I told her honestly. You better mean it. With that, Jenny left. I watched her go. It's obvious she wants to marry into Simon's wealthy family so badly that she never stops to wonder why I'd make different choices this time. I've even hinted enough, haven't I? I smiled silently, got back to reading. Not sure what Jenny told my parents, but even my mom gently hinted to me not to get involved. I chuckled. Mom, I'm preparing for grad school. I'm not thinking about anything else. You, Dad, and Jenny can all relax. My mom hesitated, wanting to say something, but eventually nodded. That's good. In my past life, I wanted to go to graduate school after college. I even applied for student loans, but marrying Simon interrupted my plans. In this life, I not only planned to go to grad school, but I'm aiming to study abroad. Lately, I've been busy with all sorts of applications and paperwork. I leave next month. On the day I was leaving, early in the morning, I dragged my suitcase out and ran into Simon coming in. He paused, giving me a deep look. I felt a sudden unease. Simon hasn't been reborn. Otherwise, Jenny wouldn't fool him. But every time he looks at me, it feels like he remembers everything from our past life. I clutched my suitcase handle tighter. Mr. Simon, Jenny's inside. Go on in. Simon walked towards me slowly. Where are you going? I opened my mouth. Simon. Jenny came out. I breathed a sigh of relief. Jenny stormed over, clinging to Simon's arm, shooting me a fierce glare like she was claiming her territory. She's getting more protective. I'm off. I walked past them and out. I could hear Simon asking Jenny, is your sister moving out? She's preparing for grad school. Doesn't like the crowd at home, Jenny replied sweetly. Simon, what brings you here? Simon smiled. My parents agreed. Even as I walked further away, I could still hear Jenny's excited voice. I headed to the airport and boarded the plane. Jenny got her wish, marrying Simon, and I'll get into my dream school. We both have bright futures. Living alone abroad isn't easy, especially since I'm here to study, not vacation, and I don't have much money. Aside from studying, I started various part-time jobs. One day, while working in a cafe, I bumped into Sandy. In the past, after Simon broke off with media with Sandy, she ended her engagement to him. I met Sandy 4 years after marrying Simon. She'd returned from studying abroad, joining the family business, crossing paths with Simon in work. One day, Sandy called me. She said, Judy, Simon's drunk. Can you come pick him up? I went. Simon was already passed out. Sandy gave me a faint smile. Since you're here, I'll head off. Goodbye. She didn't explain why she was with Simon or why he drank so much. On the way back, I looked at Simon beside me and suddenly heard him say, maybe from the start, it was all wrong. I still don't know if Simon meant me and him. Snapping back from memories, I smiled and greeted her. Hi. Sandy laughed. Her laugh still feels relaxed and comforting, just like in the past. She ordered a latte. So later, after chatting for a bit, I found out she and I applied to the same school. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom asking me to come back for Simon and Jenny's wedding. I glanced at Sandy and replied to my mom, I can't make it. I'm in the UK. That's when my family finally realized I had gone abroad, but they didn't say much about it. Sandy's voice suddenly broke through my thoughts. Mind if I ask, do you know Jenny? I didn't hide anything. I'm Jenny's sister. We're fraternal twins. No wonder you look alike, she said with a faint smile. My fiancé broke off the engagement with me because of your sister. Then she added, my ex-fiancé is Simon. I knew this, but I had no idea what to say. I mean, should I congratulate her? Sandy chuckled. I'm just messing with you. She took a sip of her coffee. Sandy came to this cafe almost every day and gradually, we became friends. When my landlord sold the house and I had nowhere to live, she took me in. She even mentioned, make sure you pay rent like anyone else. I knew she was just trying to make me comfortable. Both of us got into grad school and we studied there for 2 years. I never went back home. My family only called me at the beginning, but later, nothing. I didn't really have any feelings towards them. Sometimes, blood ties aren't enough to keep a family together. There's nothing you can force. The night we graduated, Sandy and I hit the bars to celebrate. We didn't make it home until the next morning. Just as I was about to fall asleep, Sandy's phone rang. I was too tired and just dozed off. But Sandy woke me up after her call. "What's up?" I said, groggy. Sandy sat on my bed, looking at me with concern. "Judy, my parents want me to go home for a marriage alliance. Even well-off families have their own issues. I'd learned that during my time with Simon's family." I asked Sandy, "Do you not want to marry for alliance?" Sandy rolled her eyes. "Seriously, who would want that? Honestly, I should thank your sister. If it weren't for her marriage to Simon, it would have been me marrying him." I patted her shoulder. "Just get a good sleep. We'll head back the day after tomorrow." Sandy frowned. "You're heartless." Her comment amused me. "I mean, I'll help you." She looked at me puzzled. "How? Are you gonna marry me?" I rubbed my temple. "Your parents see alliances as a way for family gains. I can help them see your own worth." I explained my plan. Sandy hugged me tight, then kissed my cheeks repeatedly. "Judy, I love you for this." I wiped my cheek, pretending to be annoyed. "I'm doing it for myself too. I have this plan, but no funds." Sandy interrupted, excitedly. "I have money. This is perfect, like a match made in heaven." She showered me with more kisses. I remembered, in a past life, Sandy went back and started her own business. She once asked me to pick up Simon, who was drunk, and the next day she clarified, "We are only in business together, so nothing happened." That's the only time we connected. Later, I heard her project got taken over and she had no choice but to accept a family-arranged marriage. This time it'll be different because she has me. In these 2 years, I've been absorbing all the knowledge I could, determined to live life on my terms. The harder you work, the freer you become. And my efforts have given me confidence. Stepping back onto home soil, I took a deep breath. Finally, I'm back. "Come on, let's go." Sandy dragged me to the car. "I'm taking you to meet my parents now." She doesn't just resist marrying for allegiance, she doesn't want to get married at all. I'm having similar thoughts now. Sandy's folks agreed to give her a chance. If she makes it on her own, no arranged marriage. Leaving Simon's house, I decided to visit my own. My family had moved out from the urban village and now lived in a villa. That was something I learned when I still kept in touch before leaving the country. Back then, they called mostly to brag about Jenny, saying she transformed our family's fortune. My mom even said, "I think you're wasting your time with all that education. What's the point? Come back and work for your sister, the society lady." "Judy, why not return home? Jenny and Simon could set you up with a rich guy. If not as rich as Simon, then rich enough for a good life. Why work so hard?" At those moments, I just smiled. Did my mom really think marrying the wealthy was a ticket to paradise? I brought home gifts from the UK, but when I walked in, I heard crying. My mom's piercing voice reached my ears. "Divorce? Did Simon really ask for a divorce?" I paused. My marriage with Simon lasted 5 years in the past life. I thought Jenny would handle her marriage to Simon better than I did. Yet, here they are, ending it in just 3 years. I stepped inside. "Mom, Dad, I'm home." The noise in the living room stopped abruptly. My parents looked worried and showed no surprise when they saw me. I wasn't disappointed. I just smiled and said, "This is a gift I brought back for you from the UK." Jenny suddenly rushed over, snatched the gift from my hand, and threw it away. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, as if she wanted to kill me. "It was you, wasn't it, Judy? It was you." Honestly, I was a bit confused when Jenny went crazy the moment I got back. Until I heard Jenny hysterically shouting, "Simon just talked about divorce, and then you showed up. Have you two been scheming together all along?" My parents immediately stepped in. "Judy, is it true?" I bent down, picked up the gift from the floor, put it on the coffee table, and calmly said, "Don't worry. I'm well educated, and I wouldn't do something as low as seducing my sister's husband." Jenny still didn't believe me. She lunged at me like a mad woman. "Then why did you come back now?" I looked at her speechlessly. "I came back because I just graduated from my grad program." Jenny's face looked less deranged, but she was a mess of tears and snot, her makeup smudged, still pretty much like a crazy person. "Are you sure you haven't been in touch with Simon?" I chuckled lightly. "Why would you think I'd be in contact with him?" Jenny was stunned for a moment and suddenly came to realization. "You knew all along, didn't you? That's why you never fought me for Simon in this life." She started laughing hysterically, pointing at me. "Judy, turns out your past life wasn't as glamorous as you pretended it to be. My mom was terrified. Jenny, what nonsense are you talking about? Past lives? Don't scare your mom. Mom and Dad, I'll be going now. My mom caught up with me. Where are you going? You're back now. Why don't you stay at home? I shook my head. I'll be busy, but I'll visit when I have time. Just as I reached the villa's entrance, Jenny caught up with me. Judy, don't go. Tell me, in your past life, did you live like this too? I looked coldly at the crazed Jenny. I didn't know what her life with Simon was like after they married, but I could imagine. Jenny, I said in an icy tone, do you remember what I was doing when you drove into me in the past life? Jenny seemed to really be trying to remember. I told her, I was pulling a suitcase, getting ready to leave Simon's house, because I had asked Simon for a divorce. Jenny froze. In the past, after I said, Simon, let's divorce, I packed up my things in a small suitcase and left. After walking a distance, I saw Jenny driving a red car coming at me. The madness and jealousy in her eyes consumed her. I stared wide-eyed at her evil, twisted smile, then the next second fell into endless darkness. Jenny was always jealous that I married into a wealthy family. In the past, Jenny kept pestering Simon and me to introduce her to rich guys, but no one was interested in her. She didn't have the education, wasn't all that breathtaking to look at, and came from a mediocre family. Even with Simon as a brother-in-law, rich folks weren't dumb enough to link up just to get close to Simon's family. Back then, the Lin family was very separate from ours, and people in the circle knew this. So Jenny ended up marrying a regular office worker. Her husband couldn't buy her Hermes or Porsches, so whenever she saw me in designer clothes, shiny jewelry, with a driver, the jealousy was clear in her eyes. Eventually, she was devoured by jealousy and crazily questioned me. I'm only 12 minutes younger than you. Why is everything better for you? When she drove at me, she laughed and shouted. Mouths the words, Judy, go to hell. In the quiet of night, I did think about making Jenny pay with her life. But I didn't want to dirty my own hands. In this life, I can live the way I want, undisturbed, and I'm grateful for that. I don't want to ruin it. So I warned Jenny, I don't care about you and Simon's issues. But remember, Jenny, I spared you once. If you tempt fate again, I'll settle scores from the past too. I pushed her away and stepped into the waiting taxi outside. Sandy had already prepared a place for me. Soon, our company with Sandy was set up under the Smith Group. The first deal Sandy got was with Simon. I attended as a representative. Simon looked surprised to see me, still looking at me the same way, but now I could remain composed. Mr. Simon, hello, I greeted with a smile. Simon withdrew his inquisitive look and smiled mildly. We got down to business. It was clear Simon wasn't too experienced, and he just had to go with my flow. Funny, considering I was the newbie in this field. Luckily, things went smoothly. If Simon is satisfied, please sign here. I handed the contract to him. Simon looked at me quietly for a moment, then signed his name and stamped it. I wanted to remind him to double-check, but I thought better of it. I'm a businesswoman now. Simon, pleasure doing business. I stood up and extended my hand. I was about to leave when Simon stopped me. Ms. Judy, he paused, then asked, have we met somewhere before? I turned around. Simon, you sure forget things easily. I'm Jenny's sister. Simon shook his head. That's not what I meant. The first time I saw you, you seemed familiar. I raised an eyebrow. Maybe I just have a familiar face. Simon walked over. He was tall, and his large frame cast a shadow over me. 3 years ago, that would have rattled me. But now, I looked him in the eye and smirked. Simon, anything else? Simon stayed silent for a while, then gently shook his head. No, nothing. I'll show you out, please. The office door was flung open abruptly, out of nowhere. Jenny barged in, unstoppable even though Simon's assistant tried to hold her back. The moment she saw me, she was like a raging bull seeing a red cape, completely losing it. Judy, you deceitful woman, you tricked me. She lunged at me, ready to slap me. Simon stepped in front of me, grabbing Jenny's wrist hard and shoved her away. He warned with a deep voice, Jenny, this is the company. Don't act crazy. Jenny was still trying to rush at me, yelling, you tramp. You seduced my husband. You should die. I'll kill you. Then there was a loud slap. Finally, Jenny calmed down. She held her cheek, looking incredulously at Simon, who had just slapped her. You hit me? Simon seemed just as shocked that he had done it. He froze for a moment. A few seconds later, he regained his composure. Get out. Jenny left crying. Simon rubbed his temples tiredly, letting out a barely audible sigh. He apologized to me. I'm sorry. I looked at Simon coldly. Just because he never hit me in the past didn't mean him hitting Jenny now made me happy. In fact, Jenny helped me see the real him. Luckily, I no longer have anything to do with him. Simon, I'm leaving. As I reached the door, Simon's heavy, slightly helpless voice followed. I'm planning to divorce her, he said. She's changed, so shallow and materialistic. I can't see the girl who saved me back then in her anymore. She shouldn't be like this. He sat on the sofa, looking even more exhausted and lost, like he was desperate for some outlet. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but let out a sarcastic laugh. He looked up, surprised. Simon, if she were still that hardworking, non-materialistic girl and didn't care about her appearance, wouldn't you find her embarrassing? I said. After all, that was me in a past life, and he still dismissed me. Men, you know, they always want what they can't have. Simon looked puzzled. Of course, he didn't understand what I meant. I didn't bother to explain either. Goodbye, Simon. Outside the building, I was about to get in my car when Jenny's shrill voice pierced through the air. Judy, you tramp. She charged at me from the side. You said you wouldn't compete with me. Why did you come back? Why? With her voice raised, she drew everyone's attention, wildly waving her hand at me. Annoyed, I pushed her away. In her high heels, she stumbled to the ground. I lowered my eyes, looking down at her. Jenny, I get that you think I've spent the last 3 years waiting to snatch a man from you. Because to you, life is just about a man. You just assume everyone else thinks the same as you. I'll tell you one last time, I'm not fighting you for Simon. Because he's not worth it. Tears welled in Jenny's eyes, ruining her makeup and making her look pitiful. What do you mean? She asked. You still don't get it? I chuckled softly. Do you know why I don't seek revenge on you? Because someone like you isn't worth getting my hands dirty for. I crouched down in front of her, looking her straight in the eye. I should be thanking you, Jenny, for giving me a chance to start over. This time around, I didn't step into Simon's golden cage. Being free feels great. Thank you, Jenny. Jenny finally realized, you did it on purpose. From the start, you didn't plan to take Simon from me, did you? Judy, you knew what would happen if I married Simon. You pushed me into the fire pit on purpose. She jumped up, shaking her head desperately. No, that's not the fire pit. I won't divorce. I can't divorce. She ran back into the company building. Simon, don't divorce me, please. Don't leave me. I slowly stood up, watching Jenny's retreating figure. Everything suddenly felt resolved. I handed a signed contract to Sandy. Her eyes widened. He signed it just like that? I was stunned too. The thrill of signing the contract made me forget to wonder why Simon agreed so easily. Sandy set the contract down, scrutinizing me. I heard from my dad that Simon and your sister are getting divorced. I sat down with a light acknowledgement. Sandy eyed me warily. So why did he sign with you so easily? Is he trying to rekindle something with me? I have no intentions of getting married, especially to a second-hand man, she said. I chuckled. Don't worry. Sandy moved in closer. You know, Simon's family had quite the scandal while we've been away these 3 years. I'm not trash-talking your sister, but she made quite the mess in our circle. When she first squeezed into the socialite group, she acted like a little tyrant just because she married into Simon's family, offending quite a few people. Do you know what they called her behind her back? A clown. Simon couldn't take the embarrassment and wanted the divorce. Sandy shared lots of stories about Jenny's life in Simon's family, and I could picture it pretty well. I just smiled and brushed it off. That's their business, not mine. Even though I suspected Simon of ulterior motives for signing so readily, I couldn't deny that it opened a lot of doors for our company. Projects started rolling in. Eventually, Sandy's father stopped pushing her to go on blind dates. Back when we set up the company, Sandy owned 51% of the shares, while her father owned 49%. One day, Sandy handed me a transfer of shares document. What's this? I asked, confused. That's my dad's 49% share for you. Go ahead and sign it. She casually tossed the document at me. I caught it gingerly. Show some respect for the weight of these shares, will you? Sandy laughed. My dad said I should work well with you, and he proposed giving you these shares to keep you around. I accepted happily. 6 months later, Simon and Jenny finally got divorced. After all the fuss, Jenny's lost so much weight she barely weighs over 90 pounds. She looks like she aged a decade. When I went back home to visit my parents, I randomly ran into her. She saw me getting out of a Porsche and snickered. Judy, what rich old guy did you hook up with this time? I walked right past her, with my stuff, and said coldly, Jenny, I'm not like you. Seeing me return, my parents were a lot warmer. After they found out I started my own company, they called me almost every day, inviting me home for meals. So, yeah, fake family love kinda needs money and status to keep it going. In this world, only hard work and money won't betray me. While we were eating, Jenny didn't come down. I glanced toward the door. Don't mind her, my dad snapped, then smiled at me, serving me food. Judy, eat up. It's been ages since you had your mom's cooking. Eat more. I grinned a bit. After the meal, I left. Didn't stay the night. They're still my parents. I'll visit when I have time. But I just can't get close to them, and I don't want to force myself. Then one day, my mom called me, crying, Judy, come back now. Jenny's trying to sell the house. Turns out, after divorcing Simon, Jenny didn't quit her reckless spending, blew through all the money Simon gave her. Now she's broke, planning to sell the house. But the house is in my parents' name. They won't sell, and she brought people to wreck the place. I had someone stop her. My parents were so mad they kicked her out and said, we don't have a daughter like you. Judy, from now on, you're our only daughter. Inside, I laughed bitterly but stayed quiet. On my way back to the office, Simon called me. He said he wanted to discuss business. But when I showed up, he said, you always seemed so familiar to me. He continued, lately, I've thought a lot. Why did the little girl who saved me change so much? I can't see any trace of her. He looked deeply at me. Actually, the little girl who saved me back then, that was you, wasn't it? Well, Simon, if you only asked me out to say this, I'm leaving. I got up to leave the tea house, then suddenly a loud engine noise broke out. I whipped around, and what I saw hit me hard. Jenny was driving a red car straight toward me. Her mouth was shouting, Judy, just die already. The car crashed into a flower bed with a boom, billowing white smoke. I fell to the ground, staring at Simon sprawled there. In that split second, Simon had rushed to save me, but he got hit by the car and passed out. The ambulance arrived quickly. Simon and Jenny were both taken to the hospital. Jenny was hurt badly. Simon's awake now. I felt a bit relieved. Simon, you're awake. I'll call the doctor. Judy. Simon's voice was weak, but his tone felt so familiar. In the past life, he called me just the same way. Judy, I love you. Judy, I'll be good to you forever. Judy, I'd give up everything I have just to be with you. My body stiffened a bit and I turned around. Simon got out of bed and stood right in front of me, his eyes red and teary, staring at me hard. Why? Why'd you lie to me? Judy, why didn't you admit it was you? He remembered. I was just shocked, not scared at all. I stepped back, putting some distance between us. Seeing Simon's lost expression, I slowly said, Simon, the thing I regret most from my past life was marrying you. In this life, I just want to stay far away. No. He reached out to hug me. I deftly dodged aside. Simon, almost 6 feet 3 inches, was now crying like a lost child. I'm sorry, Judy. It's my fault. I shouldn't have rejected you. I didn't mean it. I'll change. No matter what anyone says about you, this time, I'll stand by you. Judy, come back to me, will you? He grabbed my wrist hard, his tearful eyes pleading. I can't live without you. I ran out to tell you I won't divorce, but it was too late. You died under Jenny's car. He hugged me tight. I lost you once. This time, I won't let you go again. Judy, give me a chance to make it up to you, please? I waited for him to calm down, then pushed him away. I stepped back, as if leaving his world completely, and told him calmly, Simon, I don't love you anymore. Jenny woke up. When I entered her room, she was throwing a fit. Shut up. I can stand up. I definitely can stand. You useless doctors, get out of here. Seeing me made Jenny even crazier. She lunged at me, fell to the ground, and still crawled my way. Judy, you've ruined my life. I'll kill you. The nurse quickly helped her back to bed. The doctor told me, her injuries are too severe. She'll spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. After the doctor and nurse left, I looked at Jenny, still raging on the bed, silent, and walked out. Even from quite a distance, I could still hear Jenny's mad shouts. She's not someone I even need to say a word to anymore. Word is, she'll be charged with attempted murder and likely go to jail. I walked out of the hospital. The sun was shining bright, lighting up the path ahead. Sandy called right at that moment. Anna, Louis from France is here to see you. When are you coming back? Right away. I picked up the pace. The future looked open and promising. I made the right choice.